Welcome back, everybody, to the JMC Cast, the Joseph and Michael Cast, or as I want to rename it to, the Ween Appreciation Society.
Beautiful, beautiful, Michael.
We've got, obviously, myself and Joseph, the regulars,
hello.
And we've got Jude on as a guest. Say hello to them.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, there we go. The wonderful audience. Again, as usual, we've got two movies, both in foreign languages, because we want to look smart.
Yes.
And they're both long as well. I noticed that.
Those are 5 hours of my life I'm never getting back.
Yeah. Both coming up on like 2.5 hours. But probably worth watching.
Well, one of them.
I'd say so.
We're getting some hot takes
getting
today.
spicy. I just realised that we normally flip a coin to choose which movie to do first. All my money is out of reach of my desk, and I've got headphones on. So if someone else has a coin, that'd be helpful.
I've got a coin.
Oh yeah. There we go.
Heads.
Alrighty, so heads we talk about Stalker first, and tails we talk about Downfall first.
Okay, here we go. Tails. Downfall.
Alright, brilliant. That's my choice.
Sounds good.
Spoiler warning for both of these movies that came out like 15 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's full spoilers throughout, so bear that in mind. Right,
Who wants to go first?
so
So does Michael go first, considering it's his film?
it is my movie, yes. I have to admit, I am biased on this one, because this is, it's like the third time I've watched this now, because it is one of my personal favourite films. Obviously, yeah, it's also, to my knowledge, pretty much accurate for historical fiction. It is based on the main character, the secretary, obviously is a real person because you see documentary footage of her in the film, and it's mainly based on her own accounts of the final weeks in the Führer bunker. But yeah, the movie's mainly known for the one scene that got turned meme to death, basically.
Angry Hitler.
Exactly.
I was quite surprised how early on it was. It's like 40 minutes in.
Yeah.
It's around. I mean, it's around the point where the thing with this movie is it's not really about showing Hitler's descent into insanity, because he was kind of already been nuts for about 15 years by that point in time.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, because I think that was Bruno Ganz, the guy. He only died I think a couple of years ago. But yeah, his depiction of him is like legendary, and with good reason, because he's great and it's a great movie.
Very good actor.
You wouldn't think a film could almost kind of make you feel sorry for Hitler at some points, which is a really weird emotion to have, because it's like, he is, the way he flits between sort of delusions of grandeur and suicidal defeatism. He is kind of pathetic, really.
Yeah.
They're never likable. Anyway, what did you two think?
Should I go
Yeah,
first?
you can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did really love it. I remember I watched them both yesterday back to back. I didn't realise it was 2.5 hours. I thought it was like 2. But I'd say it didn't feel like 2.5 hours. There are definitely points in the film where it felt like it was ending, but I felt that worked within the context of the whole film, because basically the setting of Berlin feels almost post-apocalyptic. It's a very heavy film.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I'm mumbling my words here. There's a lot of bleakness in it. The whole end of the war feels so heavy and overpowering over everyone. Like you've got the civilians running about. We've been thrown right into the middle of this. There's no like big lead up to like the final big battle for Berlin, whatever. It's just like it's happening. It's here, and it feels just
nasty,
just grim and horrible.
Yeah, there's an atmosphere of imminent doom hanging over everything.
Certainly.
Yeah, I feel like it was quite definitive as like an end of the Reich film.
Yeah.
Because it goes through all the events pretty thoroughly and pretty in depth, and it touches on a lot of stuff that would kind of be necessary, such as like Hitler's descent into like basically, it's all over for me. I'm gonna, end it all.
Neutron style.
It's got all the other people in the bunker who are like slowly losing faith in him.
Yeah.
And who are kind of trying to pull a bit of power. I know Hitler was kind of like, he was very, very paranoid, putting it bluntly, towards the end. But there were a lot of people who were kind of trying to pull the strings just to save their own skin.
Yeah, you can see how Himmler and Goering both abandon him in the hopes that they can ingratiate themselves with the Allies and get off lightly when the war ends.
I was surprised how little Himmler was there. Like, he was at the start.
He's there at the start and disappears. And same with Goering appears in one of the scenes, but then again he goes off as well.
Yeah, I was quite surprised how little they appeared in the film as well, because they are quite big high-ups in the Nazi party.
Yeah, I don't think you ever even see Dönitz, who's the one who actually did lead the post-Hitler government, for like a few weeks to negotiate with the Allies. Well, negotiate in inverted commas.
I think I have quite an interesting perspective on this, because I haven't done history since, well, but in year 9, so probably like 3, coming up to 4 years now. And I feel like I have an interesting perspective on being more or less educated by a film, because basically my only knowledge of a lot of historical events comes through watching certain films based around it, like 1917, everything like that. So, I mean, you say it is pretty accurate, so...
I believe so, yeah. I mean, obviously it's historical fiction, so it's never going to be point to point, but most of it is pretty much is correct.
Yeah, I think all the performances are pretty... going back to what I said before about the film being pretty definitive, I think they're pretty definitive performances of Hitler and Himmler, for as little as he is there, because they look
pretty
uncanny.
Very much like them.
Yeah, and the performances, like Bruno Ganz, is just absolutely... You kind of lose yourself in it a lot of the time. But I think you can kind of lose yourself in the fact that these actors are playing these characters, because you don't know the actors, do you? Because they're all...
Because they're all German, none of them are recognisable to an English audience.
Yeah, so it kind of helps. I like that with watching more foreign films, because it feels a bit more...
believable.
I suppose so.
Yeah, when you don't have the recognition of actors.
Yeah.
So, Joseph, do you want to have a shot at it?
I did quite like this film, but just like the actual Third Reich, it was super depressing and dragged on for far too long. Again, like Jude said, all the performances were absolutely spot on, and like the set design as well. I mean, the bunker kind of looked like the inside of the TARDIS from the Invasion of Time, but apart from that, it was all spectacular.
I believe, let me check. They did. Yeah, the director used a combination of. I'm fairly sure the bunker is like pretty much an accurate recreation of the actual one, based on the schematics and stuff. Certainly, a lot of detail went into making sure it was an accurate look for 40s Berlin.
As bombed out as it was.
Yes.
Yeah. Bombed out hellscape, basically.
Yeah. I thought it was quite interesting how they introduced Hitler in the film, because when he's first introduced, he's kind of like a kindly old man kind of vibes he gives off, but that's obviously just the veneer that he's putting onto the general public and his people close to him.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things this does really well, and it is accurate in there, remember that Hitler was a really charismatic person. He had an attraction that made people invest in him, made people want to believe him, just because of what he was like to talk to and interact with in person. And I think it's part of the general broader thing of the film gives you a bit of an insight into how people did actually buy into it, and especially with some of them become such total fanatic supporters and worshippers of him, deluded as they are to do
Definitely. So. Goebbels especially.
One of my...
Because, I don't like using the words, but Goebbels was a simp for Hitler. He was.
His wife was as well.
Yeah.
And I thought with Goebbels as well, I know he does look like Goebbels, but the actor that they have playing Goebbels is really gaunt. So especially in the scenes where he's saying, "Oh yeah, we'll just let them die," his face almost resembles a skull because of the bone protrusion.
Pretty uncomfortably at points, I found.
I think that is just accurate. That Goebbels, if you see pictures of him, had a very emaciated look to him, very sort of skinny, slimy kind of guy.
Definitely a weasel.
I think again, the same with him. The performance is really good. Just the way he talks is almost immediately uncomfortable.
Yes, definitely.
One of my favourite parts of it was more towards the end. It was basically when it was cutting between. I can't remember exactly where. It was probably towards the back end, where it was cutting between all these civilians and children being evacuated and being bombed, and it was cutting between the basically just down in the bunker where they've got all this kind of... Is it Eva Braun has all of Yeah, it would have been Eva Braun who had all like this lavish, all this lavish furniture.
She's writing
and all
the
this...
letter to her. She's writing the letter to her sister, talking about who to give all the stuff to, and it's playing over the like scenes of destruction and death on the surface.
That was it. Yeah, I'm happy to remember that now because it was very on the nose, like the contrast between basically all of the she's basically imparting. Oh, I'm gonna give you all of my riches after I'm dead. Like here, have all my possessions and valuables. That's all available to you. Whilst looking over this, like all the civilians of Germany, the people that like Eva Braun and everyone, well, the Nazis meant to be helping, just being like
massacred,
bombed, massacred, and bombed in the streets. And it's quite a daunting scene. I found that probably one of the more effective parts of the film.
I mean, it's part of the broader thing, isn't it, of the whole fact, and again, this is a reality as well, of, Hitler abandons the German people because, as far as he's concerned, they failed him by being weak, so they don't deserve any help from him, or the Nazis in general. Which I think also ties into a larger thing, which I really like, where one of the things you notice with Hitler throughout the whole thing is that as he realises that it is all falling apart and there's no hope for him, he blames everybody but himself. It's it's the fault of his subordinates, it's the fault of the generals, it's the fault of the Allies, it's the fault of the Jews. But it's like he can't even comprehend that this is all happened because of him and his own failings. He's that deluded, which again, quite much like the real man. He's so completely
quite a sizable proportion of him basically shouting and blaming people like Himmler, the traitor, or
there was that whole scene around the dinner table where he just spent the whole time blaming people, and that was the scene.
That's what I was thinking of. I found the scene where you've got all the Hitler Youth, wasn't it? Yeah, where he's got all the youth lined up and he's giving them all medals, and he's basically saying, "I wish all the generals had as much courage as you," to all of them, whilst they're in the middle of like an absolute destroyed city where all hope is kind of lost, but he's still trying to show this kind of failed Nazi hope to these kids who have been basically processed with the good old Nazi propaganda.
Yeah, they've been filled with propaganda and about to be thrown into the meat grinder as child soldiers.
It's quite dystopian.
Yes.
I mean, that scene as well is, for me, I know one of the ones where you notice it best when you see him outdoors, and especially from a distance, of Hitler himself being this sort of quite small, stooped, very unimpressive figure. Really, he doesn't look like a leader or a grand dictator at all. He's just a weak, middle-aged man. I think also the nice touch throughout is he has the nervous tick with his hand.
Yes,
if you notice.
Yes,
just a bit.
It intensifies. I think it intensifies throughout the movie, which is a nice touch.
The one thing that I couldn't get over in this movie is how dense everyone is. Like, everyone's just so goddamn stupid. It's like, Hitler, grow a fucking brain.
I think most of the Nazis
they're deluded. They're all deluded. They're either, again, like in reality, they're either complete... I mean, Hitler himself is a total narcissist egomaniac. His entire philosophy is built on him being in charge, because clearly he's the only person capable of ruling Germany. He's completely nuts, and the rest, the Nazi leadership, are all either deluded fanatics like Goebbels, or they're sycophants who have been trying to sort of kiss up to Hitler to enhance their own power and then betray him the moment it stops being convenient. Or they're, the Wehrmacht generals who keep fighting out of a weird sense of sort of loyalty and a commitment to follow orders regardless of how insane they must be.
Yes.
Why I quite like Albert Speer, basically, like in reality, he actively disobeys the scorched earth orders because he can tell that all it's going to do is just kill civilians pointlessly. I think as well, because I do history, so I'm in this bit. One of the things you find when studying the later part of the war is that Speer is basically the only sane man in the Nazi sort of administration, because he's actually trying to do his job properly instead of getting caught up in all the craziness and the politics and the constant intrigue and backstabbing amongst the wall.
Yeah, and everyone else is having a terrible time near the end, and Eva Braun is just having a big fat Nazi wedding in the bunker. And I mean, I get it, but the whole Nazis, they're so selfish. Everyone is starving up above, and then they're all eating shortbreads and drinking champagne and having fine pastries. And it shows that even though they came to power saying, we'll look after the people, when the going gets tough, all the shortbreads go to the Nazis and the rats go to the general populace.
You know, shit, the way you're talking about them, you're almost making me feel like these are the bad guys or something.
Yeah.
Are we the baddies?
Yes, we've got skulls on our hats.
I found that the scene where they all basically, everyone like riles everyone up and is like, yeah, let's have a mad party, and then she's like,
absolute gap.
I thought it was more about them trying to face away from the end and trying to live in like blissful ignorance more than
she seems to spend all her time basically lying to herself and trying to convince herself that it's not actually happening and they're not actually all doomed and life is just going to go on as normal.
I found that party scene more not to contrast against like all of the people suffering, like all the civilians that they should be helping, but more them just trying to ignore all of it. Like especially when like a bomb hits and like the record player stops and she's like, I want to dance, keep dancing, and she's like, I don't know, put on some swing and she just starts just trying to dance basically to distract herself, and then the whole thing like I've lost the word now. The whole thing like blows open and like it's all covered in dust and they have to basically run back to the bunker. I found that to be a very significant part.
Yeah, they can't escape the reality of the situation, even if they try. On the subject of the bunker, one of the things I really like as well is obviously it is the principal location. You spend most of the movie there. You can, when you're watching, you can as how it empties out as time goes on, and more characters either sent away, escape, die, or otherwise, leave it until by the end it's basically empty aside from. It's like right by the last time we see it, it's a couple of the staff officers and the main character who's getting out of there, and that's it. Everyone else is dead or left.
I didn't realise how many people had left by there was the moment where the main character and everyone had left, like in the uniforms, and there was just these two generals left behind, and it was like all these papers on the ground and everything, and I thought it's quite haunting, like the absence of everyone.
Yeah, especially when it was so crowded and all faded off. It's some of the extra details as well are kind of interesting when they talk about Hitler's sort of militarily impossible plans to beat the Soviets by somehow like trying to create armies out of thin air and stuff. Isn't it when he appoints the new commander of the Luftwaffe and promises him thousands of jet aircraft? It's stuff like that. There's one of the things well known about the details is the bit where he talks about. They mentioned I think they tried to move the 12th, because the 9th Army have been encircled, and they tried to move the 12th in under General Venk to relieve them. And I don't think they mentioned it in the movie, but in reality what actually happened was that Venk reunited with the 9th Army, then disobeyed orders and moved his troops westwards to help evacuate civilians into American-occupied territory. They managed to get about like 300,000 people out of Berlin. So it's actually... So yeah, it's one of those cases of not everybody was still so deluded as to keep following Hitler's orders.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some sort of basic decency. I mean, it's like that with the Doctor character.
Oh yeah, I liked him. I was quite a fan of him. I feel like he was meant to be the moral centre of the Nazi party, because even with the main character, she's quite enamoured with Hitler's presence, especially at the beginning. You kind of take, because this is all from her perspective and this is all from her recount of it, you could kind of see that original encounter with him as quite, not fantasised, but quite...
She's been waiting.
She's always in reverence of him, isn't she? There's worship really amongst them.
Yeah, which is perpetuated through all the propaganda and everything. At the time, her view of Hitler is quite positive, in contrast to the scenes where she's not there, which are basically all of the meetings. You can tell he's quite different, because I mean, obviously Hitler was not the good guy.
Yeah, he when the sort of kind paternal kind of act drops, and he just goes back to sort of raving anger and mood swings and instability and all that.
General Hitler lunacy.
It's no coincidence that he spent a fair bit of his time on a cocktail tale of questionably prescribed medication from his doctors.
Yeah, well, everyone was on meth in the Third Reich, marching across the Ardennes in their boots with their crack cocaine.
The Nazis had a bit of a tendency for sort of drug misuse. Goering, I think Hitler mentioned it. Goering was a crippling morphine addict. This is why he was so fat, because he suffered an injury, got shot in like the gut, and then got addicted to morphine, and it ruined his health. I don't want to pity him too much.
Yeah, poor Nazi. Poor Nazi Joseph.
I mean, that's the thing with the Doctor character, though, isn't he? Like, he's a empathetic, rational person who can see all the suffering and is trying to prevent it. He's also a fairly high-ranking SS officer, so there's a lot of that question of humanization and how good or bad are a lot of these characters, these people.
One of my favourites, well, I say favourite, it's incredibly downtrodden and bleak like the whole film, but is when the Doctor character goes into the hospital and he's wandering around trying to look for all the meds, and he comes across, basically, it's just all the wounded, haven't they? They've basically shot up all the wounded and just thrown them there, and they've moved all the elderly and crammed them into like the lower, basically, catacombs of the hospital, and it's just, they're all completely silent, no one says anything, and they're never seen again. So you can only assume the Doctor just left them there because he can't
What other option does he have? But yeah, no,
and there's the massive pile of bodies as well.
They're all the wounded they've probably shot.
Yeah, it seems that, well, whatever's happened is they've been, the wounded or the people that have been deemed not worth saving have all been disposed of, and then all the elderly patients have been moved into the basement and forgotten. The way they just sit and stare silently is very unnerving.
I mean, this film isn't short in its sad moments part, because there are just so many
or short in general.
Yeah. When Goebbels' wife kills all her children, it's like, holy shit, are they actually going to do this in the film? Are they actually going to have her kill? Oh, she's killing her children.
And they go through all of them. All 6 of them.
One of the things I love, that sequence is good, just in the way that it's like, you're not getting away with like off-screen or implications or anything. We're going to make this very clear and very uncomfortable as to the literal child murder that's going on.
And even one of them tries to resist it as well, which just makes it even more uncomfortable, because she knows what's going to happen, sort of.
And it does do. I think you get she can tell something dodgy is going on, can't she? The kid, but it is like really good as well for showing like how deluded Goebbels and Mrs. Goebbels are, in the sense that not only are they murdering their own children, but they think they're doing it for a good, it's for their sake, it's for a good cause, because it would be unimaginable to live in a world without Hitler and without Nazis.
Yeah,
they can't conceive of anything worse, because they've bought into it so much.
They well and truly drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it's drinking the Kool-Aid on a national scale, basically.
There was
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. There was quite an undeniable tension throughout the whole thing. Like, it's a very quiet film. There isn't that much of a score or anything. It's quite a lot of time, especially the scenes where Hitler's just ranting and raving, and they're all in this tightly packed, just tiny war room where you can see when someone comes in, they have to kind of squeeze their way in, and there's just like these masses of generals just in there, and it quite heightens the tension, I find.
Yeah, especially when the bunker is claustrophobic and tight and uncomfortable, and like I said, especially when there's a lot of people in there and rounding around, and it's even it's not glamorous conditions, even for Hitler himself, really. One of the bits I really love is when the main character, I think, walks in on Hitler and just finds him sitting at his desk, staring at the portrait of Frederick the Great he has hanging on the wall, just not saying anything.
Is there any significance with that one? Because I wasn't...
Oh yeah, Frederick the Great was an 18th century king of Prussia, famous military leader, one of Germany's like greatest leaders in history, and Hitler idolized him, and he saw him as like a figure that he really looked up to, which is amusingly ironic because Frederick the Great was also he was very clearly gay, and Hitler would not have not have been a fan of that. But yeah, the whole sort of sense of him, whatever he's thinking, this failure to live up to his historical idol is probably not doing any favours for his mood.
No, not the happiest man.
But, well, as far as he's concerned, it isn't his failure. It's obviously everybody else's, because how could he be at fault?
Also, you feel bad for Blondie as well, because he's just a poor dog. And then not only does he get killed, but we have either Mrs. Hitler talking about how she used to beat the dog. And it's like, well, I didn't like you already, Mrs. Hitler, but you beat your dog. I hate you.
It is. It's amazing that, isn't it, though, with movies and media, how, like, hurting animals automatically makes a character 100 times more dislikable for the audience. Yeah, you may have been so complicit in the Nazi regime that you literally married Hitler, but you also abused a dog, you bitch. It's it really gets a reaction out of people.
Rob Shearman did as one of his anthologies, he did a good story about someone who goes to hell and then shares a room with Blondie for all eternity. And he really gets on with Blondie.
Literally meets Hitler.
You know what I thought you were going to say? I thought you were going to say that episode of It's Always Sunny where they find a picture of Hitler, like a Hitler painting of a dog. I thought you were going to mention that.
I do not like this painting, Charlie. Its smug aura mocks me. Is that the one where they're talking about it? Isn't they talking about like making a movie adaptation of it, and Mac wants to be played by Ryan Gosling? And then at the end they burn it because they thought it was a fraud, but it turns out to have actually been real.
Yeah, I preferred the episode where they find their grandfather's old Nazi uniform, and then Mac opens the door, and then there's just Charlie in SS officer uniform eating a banana.
Oh yeah, is it Dee and Dennis's granddad turns out to have been a Nazi?
Pop, the final solution, wasn't it?
That's anyway, yes, back on topic.
I thought it was quite interesting with the scale model of, well, not the scale model, the little model of Berlin, how they were gonna knock it all down. And even later, Hitler says, oh, it's okay that the Russians are bombing us because we were gonna knock it down anyway. But I mean, Jude, you've been to Berlin, you got your ducks there.
My Jewish ducks.
Your Jewish ducks.
That's a very out of context thing to bring up.
That's another thing Hitler would have been happy with.
No.
But the way they built Berlin, did you like
Absolutely gorgeous city. Probably one of the best in the world.
But it's like two different cities because it was rebuilt by the Soviets and the Americans. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it's... Because, I mean, as you see in the movie, the city is completely bombed into ruins, so it was almost entirely rebuilt post-war. Yeah. And obviously, the Soviet architectural style, quite distinct.
Very brutalist.
For better or for worse. But Hitler's sort of planned reconstruction of it. I'm fairly sure that is like he did want to do that because he loved like neoclassical architecture and stuff. I think it was all part of his whole sort of fetishization of history kind of thing. Grand nations of the past sort of stuff he seemed to have been a fan of. But yeah, again, that's also a great example of like it's there's points where you can see that he somehow genuinely believes he's still gonna win. My favorite is the thing where I think it's at the dinner with Lord von Grime, which is a really cool name by the way, and he's talking about how it's what does he say? So like you don't think I would have let the Soviets onto our territory accidentally, do you? And it's all part of a massive trap for the Red Army, and it's such complete nonsense.
I think you can tell as
well.
well.
A lot of them are still. A lot of them still eat it up, for whatever reasons. Yeah, but I think he sees mood swings and general sort of unstable behaviour. But the way he goes from actively suicidal to total conviction that he's going to win the war. But again, Bruno Ganz sells it perfectly because he's such a good actor.
Yeah, he does it greatly because when you think of Hitler, you think of Hitler, but you kind of forget that but you kind of forget that he was just a human being and he was a prat. Yeah, I mean, to put it lightly.
This film's subtitle might as well be Humanizing the Nazis, the movie, because obviously we do know Hitler as the basically byword for ultimate evil, but he was still a person, a badder person as he was, and I think the film does make him a lot more three-dimensional and nuanced in the portrayal of him. Still not exactly sympathetic, but pitiable
to an extent, but I think the sympathy comes from the perspective of the main character.
How hopeless the situation is.
Well, I mean, because you see. I mean, you see what most of them are like, the characters like by the end, where it's basically suicide, merry-go-round, pretty much.
Yeah, just a depressing film. Very sad. I suppose most Second World War films are quite depressing, and First World. Just war films.
War generally is
war bad.
Not all fun and games.
War bad.
Yeah. And then again, I mean, and also I'm a sucker for when they do it in movies anyway. But again, the thing at the end where explaining what actually happened to all of the people shown on screen. You know, one of the things that you actually notice is that, like, even the people who did survive the war, you know, a lot of them got captured by the Russians and spent like another decade as POWs.
Oh yeah, that was quite
released.
Quite a thing to see, because it was like,
yeah,
you think they're out of it now if they've survived this, and then it's just another 10 years. I also found it interesting how one of them just vanished without trace. She was quite a minor character, but she was just never found again.
That was. Then again, that does, you know, in a situation like that where it's all gone to hell and there's multiple armies crawling through the city, and you know, isn't that hard to believe that somebody could just disappear and drop off the map if they wanted to.
Right off to Argentina.
Yeah, the general thing as well, and this was generally the case with the end of the war, was that you were far better off getting captured by the Western Allies than you were getting captured by the Russians. I love that scene where the scene where you get with Marshal Zhukov, where one of the I think it's Yodel, one of the generals, goes to try and negotiate with him, and he's trying to like arrange for a peace settlement. And Zhukov's reaction is basically to say like, "Are you joking? It's because the idea that the fact that they somehow think the Russians are going to want to negotiate with them at this point. Then again, they're so focused on saving their own skins.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think that is. Well, I was going to say that's kind of what happened. Like, you know, when it was all over and the Nuremberg trials took place, the people who confessed and admitted their guilt and the like, and provided evidence against the others, did get lighter sentences. This, like, Albert Speer still spent 20 years in prison, but he got out alive, compared to, you know, execution, which is what a lot of them got served with. I think it's the same thing with Admiral Dönitz, because he took over the post-war government and arranged the like proper sort of peace treaty signings.
Yeah.
I mean, still got like a decade plus in prison, I think, because
he's a Nazi.
There was this one scene where one of the wasn't he? He was like the head of like all the horrific experiments on just the horrific experiments. That like the Nazis performed on people, and he's like sweating profusely, and he's just like, he looks quite terrified because he was trying to excuse himself from the bunker and for him to leave Berlin, because you could see the look on his face, like he knows what he's done and he knows what they'll do to him because of what he's done, and he looks absolutely desperate to try and get out. And you don't see him again, do you? I don't think.
No,
I believe he was in the end, where he said he was at the Nuremberg trials and sentenced to execution, I believe.
Yeah, I think he did. They said he did get execution.
Who was the lad that blew up his wife and kids with the grenades? Because that was quite a harrowing scene.
That was another one of the generals. I can't remember his name now.
Very sad.
Yeah, that scene especially is.
And Hitler just didn't care about his subordinates' families, which, I mean, I can't say, oh, Hitler, what an arsehole, because everyone knows Hitler's an arsehole. He's Hitler, but
he seemed to be pretty proud of his good old the Nazi Goebbels kids.
Yeah, but
yeah,
Hitler don't care about anyone, but. He don't care about anyone.
Oh, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. The doctor was Gravitz, is a physician. But yeah, no, I think he was either complicit in or leading some of the like horrifying human experimentation the Nazis had been doing.
Yeah.
Was he the chap that knocked up the sleepy solution?
The what? Sorry.
The thing that makes them children go to sleep.
No, that was. I can't remember the name of that character. I think that guy was just like the bunker's sort of resident medical, officer. He was actually quite well praised though, because he does immediately come across as sort of I don't know what the word be, slimy, I guess.
Yeah, he's definitely quite greasy.
They all are, really.
Yeah.
One of my favourite parts of the film, now thinking about it, is how well, because it seems like it's mainly like the Hitler story, well, until like the last half an hour where it's basically the aftermath. But I really liked how well it transitioned between, like, it's got like an intensely large cast of generals and civilians. I liked how well it transitioned between them, because it didn't just like cut back and forth between all of them constantly. It kind of flowed through. Like there was a part where you could hear like a gunshot or something through the bunker, and then it cuts to Goebbels' wife and the chemist like mixing up the sleeping solution as they hear that loud shout.
Yeah.
And then it continues on through that story of like giving the children that sleeping solution and then continuing on. It flowed really well.
It certainly did.
Yeah, they give you and with the characters of the Doctor and the kid, it gives you a great broader scale of seeing what was happening from multiple German perspectives. Especially like as well how at the end the main characters do actually, the storylines cross over and meet up together as they end up working together to get out by the end.
Yeah.
Which I think felt was a nice natural way to draw all the strands of the story together. But I mean, just in general, it's really well constructed in regards to all the plotting and stuff like that.
Yeah, for a 2.5-hour film, it was pretty immaculately paced.
Yes.
Yeah, I never felt like it was getting too sort of overly long.
And I'm quite happy for that one, because I had to watch two 2.5-hour films yesterday. So
Yes.
God, yeah.
it was quite a good one for me.
Yeah, that's
Shall we go on to final thoughts?
yes, I think we've got a nice point for a segue there. Right, who is?
It's Jude's film.
Wanna go first,
No, it's
or?
Michael's film. Michael, you can go first then.
Yeah, no, like I said, this is one of my personal favourite movies, just because I like the subject matter and I like how well it's represented. I don't know about scores, maybe like 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. But yeah, I mean, it's a great movie and I recommend it, especially if you like a good war film. So yeah, no, it's worth the watch anyway. Actually, I think it's really good in a lot of respects.
Shall I go next?
Yeah, you can go next.
Oh yeah. I'd probably give it like a good solid 8. Will I rewatch it anytime soon? Probably not, because it's incredibly bleak and heavy. Not a summertime film, despite having watched it during summertime. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I thought it was pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably give it a good old 7 out of 10, because whilst all the acting was really good and the set design was beautiful, it did drag on for a bit, and it was just really uncomfortable of like, who do I support? Nobody. Okay. That's okay, kind of thing. It's like, who's the good guy? Oh, they're all Nazis. There's no good guys.
I do get the discomfort in it. I found the discomfort worked in its favour a lot of the times, but there is an argument for the fact that it being pretty uncomfortable and pretty heavy watch could kind of detract from it.
It does challenge you as a viewer as it's showing, making you empathise with bad people.
Yes. Anyway, talking about uncomfortable heavy watches that dragged on for too long, let's go on to Jude's film. Jude, do you want to take it away?
That's a personal attack right there. So yeah, Stalker from
1979.
So it's like 41 years old now. Yeah, personal attack on me. Stalker, I think, is an amazing film. It was actually the first film I watched in lockdown, although I did take it in 2 chunks, because that's understandable if you did. I didn't the second time around, though.
You watched it twice?
No, I have watched it twice, but I watched it once a while ago, so it does make it a bit more bearable. Do you two want to say your thoughts on it, and then I'll add on to that, because I think it'd be easier.
I'll go first. I was actually quite interested because so I remember thinking Tarkovsky. Where did I recognise it from? Then I realised he also did the original adaptation of Solaris, which I do want to watch at some point because it seems like it is. I've read the book and I'd be interested to see how well the film is adapted, because the book seems very difficult to adapt. And this movie as well apparently is very loosely based on a
Roadside Picnic.
Roadside.
That one.
Yeah.
I think I'm just looking at the Wikipedia. Apparently, it is like a very loose adaptation. It just takes
incredibly bad.
I think it takes the idea of the zone and the stalkers, and that's about it. But yeah, personally, I am torn, because on the one hand, I found it like laboriously long, but on the other hand, I can completely see why being so long was necessary. The fact that, according to the trivia here, there's 142 shots in 163 minutes. The average shot length is over a minute, and many last for more than 4.
Yeah.
So it is. It really. There are definitely a few moments where, because it was framed with the characters standing quite a bit away from the camera, and earlier in the movie as well, I did have a couple moments of because earlier on in the movie when I wasn't as good at distinguishing the voices, there were a few moments where I was confused about who was supposed to be talking.
No, I understand. There was a lot of they definitely must have done a lot of voiceover. So like they film all the actors, but then they record the voiceover because there was a lot of dissonance between like where they were positioned and like the location they were in.
I think looking at the locations they're filming in, where a lot of outdoors, a lot of echoey buildings and the like, you can see why they might.
With a lot of running water as well,
and very radioactive, actually.
Yeah, didn't his wife die from like radioactive stuff in the air, the white particles?
Oh well, here's the thing: he died, his wife died, the actor who played the Wright died, the actor who played the Stalker died, all within 10 years of finishing the film. All from cancers probably caused by filming in an incredibly toxic location. So
bear in mind they were filmed. Most of the Zone was filmed in
an Estonian power plant, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think. Well, the sound designer said. We were shooting near Tallinn in the area around the small river Yagala with a half-functioning hydroelectric station. Up the river was a chemical plant pouring out poisonous liquids downstream.
It was paper processing, wasn't it?
Many women in the crew got allergic reactions on their faces. Tarkovsky died from cancer. Tolia Solonitsyn died as well. And then it was all connected to the location shooting for the Stalker when Tarkovsky's wife also died. The movie literally killed the director, which you can't say about most things.
No.
I think as well. Apparently, they spent. Yeah, here's we go. They spent a year shooting all the outdoor scenes, and then they got back to Moscow and found that the film hadn't been developed properly, and all the footage was unusable.
Yeah, it was all blue. In fact, they had to reshoot it twice because the second time round, Tarkovsky just didn't like it, and he was like, "Yeah, we're doing this again."
And I mean,
fired the cinematographer.
Can you imagine? Must have driven the poor man insane to have all of that work lost. Yeah, I mean, there's we could talk for ages because there's a lot of interesting stuff about the making of the film as well as the film itself. But I certainly like I like the sort of soft sci-fi kind of vibe where it's set in some indeterminate future with very vague sci-fi kind of elements, with the Zone and what its exact nature is and all that. But it's all deliberately kept unknown. Anyway, what were you going to say? Sorry.
Whilst I did go into this film thinking I was going to really enjoy it, I really didn't. I really did not like this film because I was like, Jude, he's a good judge of films. I trust that he's picked a good film. And then I just did not like this.
He is a good judge of films, to be fair.
Like, if I want to watch a static shot of rain for 5 minutes, I can look out the window. We live in England. Where literally no one talks and it's just rain.
That's the longest shot. It's like 5 minutes.
It's ridiculous. It is the most pretentious film I've ever seen. Half the film is just one shot, and then an actor will turn to the camera and start delivering philosophy. It feels like you can feel that the director thinks, "Oh yeah, I'm better than the person watching this." Gives that kind of vibe where he's like, "Oh yeah, I know more than you. Shut the fuck up."
I love how you try to insinuate that you are somehow less pretentious than acclaimed Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky. I'm not saying pot's calling the kettle black here, but no, it does. For me, it does fall into that unique category of movies which I like to call films where the main characters are surprisingly quick to become very philosophical. But then again, it feels like the atmosphere of the Zone seems to have that kind of effect on people. The surreal landscape, the confusing nature of travelling through it. I can imagine it's going to screw with a few heads. Certainly, it makes for great imagery. All the abandoned industrial buildings and slowly being overtaken by nature.
I know this is going to sound weird, but the second time watching it's a lot more bearable. And I know from your description there, you won't be rewatching it anytime soon.
No.
But it did make for a lot better listen. A lot better watch. I find it quite relaxing, the whole film.
No, I get that. I found it relaxing. Possibly not in the intended way because I almost drifted off at one point, but still relaxing.
I'd certainly advise people with insomnia to watch it in case they need help going to sleep.
You're really tearing into this, aren't you?
Yep. And I'm loving it.
But one of my favourite parts of the film, I was thinking about this time actually, was how like the three characters kind of represent humanity as a whole. I know that sounds very pretentious, but like you've got the writer who represents the right side of the brain, you know, the more creative side. You've got the professor who represents the more left side of the brain, you know, like the sciences and the more methodical approach. And then you've got the Stalker, who's more of a soul. Throughout the whole film, you've got, you know, the Stalker's being very philosophical. They all kind of are, but they're always telling each other to shut up. But the Stalker's the only one who isn't, and they're all very like callous against each other. Apart from the Stalker, who is more impartial. I mean, there's a whole sense of apathy throughout the entire film, really. But whilst they're very opposite sides of the coin, the writer and the professor, I found it quite interesting to have those two very distinct sides of culture and like invention kind of paralleling each other. They're both incredibly cynical throughout the whole film, especially in the final part where they're both right outside the room but they don't go in.
Nobody goes in the end. I really like that.
The only one who seems to be compassionate anyway is the Stalker, who's never cynical in any way. In fact, towards the very end, he does become cynical, but only due to the other two cynicism. Like they don't believe at all in the room, and they just don't enter it, and they kind of leave it alone, and it kind of destroys him in a way. It really crushes his soul.
He seems to lose faith in people's capacity to have hope by the end, because it seems like he is a veteran of it, but for whatever reason, those two have really killed his life. I did find.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, they are both, what I found interesting, well, whilst they're both very cynical, they are in different ways. I certainly found the professor's sort of very quiet and reserved and tends only to speak when necessary kind of type, but is obviously very sort of rational, logical observation, scientisty, whilst the writer is a lot more verbose, a lot more abrasive, and a tendency to be a lot more sort of simultaneously hold himself in very high regard, but also be filled with self-hatred.
Pretty much.
I don't know what it is exactly about him, but he is simultaneously sort of talking about, you know, what an absolute pathetic failure is, but also has this attitude of self-assured intellectual superiority over everybody else. He has the sort of annoying tone of somebody who thinks they've figured it all out and everybody must just be stupid because I haven't understood it. And then you've got the poor old Stalker who's just trying to deal with both of them and get over his own issues. I think the loss of faith thing as well, I did pick up on there's a touch of religious imagery as well. With
the Crown of Thorns.
The Crown of Thorns I noticed, and as well there's the shot where it's sort of moving over the river, I think it's like the riverbed, and you can see the cracked mosaics on the ground, under the water, and then you see like an image of Jesus and you realise it's the ruins of a church. And I couldn't tell you what it means.
But it means something.
But it is certainly distinctive and striking imagery. But yeah, I think it's part of the general loss of faith theme that runs throughout. So whether it's faith in religion or faith in humanity or faith in anything, considering it's a pretty, I suppose faith in the room, which is what the Stalker has and then loses because he realises that, what it's granting people isn't good for them.
Hello, and sorry for that brief interlude. Michael forgot what he was saying and went to grab a drink of water. So
yeah, we had technical difficulties.
Yes. So back on track now. Who wants to say something?
Yeah, he seems to be very emotionally invested in the zone and the room, particularly because like the opening where he basically leaves his wife and kid behind despite her begging him to stay, because he is so, I don't know whether enamoured would be the word, but you get the impression that he can't really imagine doing anything else with his life aside from being a stalker. Also, I feel like we should talk about his wife and kid, mainly because of that final shot.
Oh, the ending.
Yeah. Turns out she's able to use telekinesis now, the whole time, which is a proper sort of what?
Well, she was. They did say it's she was a child of. Was it Child of the Zone? That was it.
Yeah, with her randomly being telekinetic. What was up with that? It just came out of nowhere.
I mean, I wouldn't take that part too much as a major important thing, despite it being the last shot. I don't know. I kind of see it as maybe a bit of hope in a way, because the whole film is surrounded in this kind of nihilism. Like, you could kind of see it as Tarkovsky taking a look of the nihilism of humanity, such as like the goodness of humanity being Stalker is kind of in contrast to like the brain of humanity, both sides of the writer and the professor, and he's constantly being ground down by them. Yeah. Like, he's physically attacked by both of them, even though he goes to attack Professor. He's pretty much physically in conflict with them towards the end.
Yeah, they're constantly fighting and not getting along.
One question I have is...
Sorry, what was that, Joseph?
One question I have is that the Stalker makes it clear that if you bring a weapon into the zone, it will stop you, and that's shown more by the tanks and the gun. But how did the Professor sneak a nuclear bomb into the zone without the zone not noticing?
It's not quite clear, is it? Because obviously he spends so much of the movie desperate to keep his backpack, and we find out why by that point. But there's that point, isn't it, where he doubles back to get it, and the Stalker like tells him not to go because he'll get lost. But instead he ends up meeting the other two again, and I think the Stalker comments that the zone must have let him through. So I interpret it as the zone being aware that he has, if the zone is aware, being aware that he has the bomb, but for whatever reason allowing him to move on, possibly because it knows that he wasn't actually going to use it, deep down.
I think a lot of the film, you're kind of thinking of whether they say the story of like the meteorite having hit and all of this, but the whole thing could be kind of taken like the zone isn't alive and like nothing really happens in the zone. It could all be taken as more of a psychological thing, because you never actually see anything happen. You never see any like physical consequences of like them like disrespecting the zone or like going out of the way to go the wrong way as the writer does, and he's kind of warded back to the other two.
Nothing happens.
The writer is probably the closest we get, because he goes out and then he hears one of them calling him back, but neither of them actually said anything. So it seems like the zone gave him a warning or something. This also does, talking about Solaris, you can see why Tarkovsky would adapt that, because there is a similar sense of some entity that, in this case, may or may not even exist, but is able to influence its environment and does so in ways that are completely alien to humans trying to understand it. Like you said, there could have been, there might not even have been a meteorite. There might not be anything alien, or it's all a product of the mind. Or maybe there is something going on there in with what the zone is. It's impossible to tell, and it's also far better off for being left unresolved rather than telling the audience what's going on, because usually that just makes things worse.
Yeah, I'm quite happy. It kind of subverted itself in a way where, like, you think, there are these three people going into like there's this room of like deepest desire, and they have to go through all these, like, it's a very dangerous zone and there are all these traps. Your mind would automatically go to, it's just they're giving me loads of like gruesome traps. It's basically like more Diet Saw film in a way, but I'm quite relieved that it wasn't, because honestly
I was expecting at least one of them to die or blow up or something, but then nothing happened.
I had been expecting them to get killed off in some way or another until there was only one left, but that didn't happen, which I did kind of like, actually.
I think the emotional scarring of a lot of the trip, especially for the Stalker, would have a lot more effective than just how like, let's have one of them, like, I don't know, mauled by a trap or something.
I was under the impression that if they were going to die off, it was going to be from them turning on each other.
Yeah, I think that would have worked.
As a consequence of the effects it was having. But of course they didn't, and in the end they just give up and none of them goes into the room, which I also really liked, because again, better left as a mystery.
Yeah.
But that's also tied into the revelation of where the Stalker talks about, was it Porcupine? And how... The room did give him his desire, but it was it wasn't what he thought he'd wanted, and the idea that it's too dangerous to go in there because nobody actually knows what their deepest desire is, and that's what the room is going to give them, and it might be something that has terrible consequences.
That's probably my favourite part of the whole film, the idea of, like, you go into the room and it's not what you like. He basically, like, the writer, like, a line of his pretty much brings it to pretty much like realizes it, where it's like you don't just get what you shout at the top of your voice, and it's basically like your innermost real want. And Tarkovsky, in a way, kind of he's very much poking like poking, like, that's not the word, that's not what I'm looking for. He's very much analysing like the nihilism of the human race. With the whole reveal with Porcupine is pretty crushing.
It is.
Like the whole thing about his, like, him just basically wanting money, like his innermost desire, more than like wanting his brother back, which is basically Tarkovsky saying like, oh, the human race is bitter and selfish, which is what the writer and professor's saying. And having the Stalker be like all like basically emotionally like just like haunted at the end by it, and especially during when the writer kind of figures out what happened to Porcupine, is pretty effective. There's a lot of the nihilism stuff, kind of all of the themes of it kind of come into play with, right, there's this thing I'm going to bring in. This is going to be the only time I use my media studies A-level in any point in my life.
Oh, here we go.
Afterwards. Right. Oh, here we go. Yeah. There's this bloke called Levi Strauss, and he had this theory called the binary opposition. It's basically like you, a lot of the time, your perception of like the hero and the villain are like your perception of them are built upon how they oppose each other. So like say like the classic example is, you know, Darth Vader's bad because he's against the heroes, which are Luke, Leia, Han, and Obi-Wan in the first film. I mean, there's a lot more he does bad, but you get the picture. And in Stalker, there isn't really an antagonist, it's all psychological. And what Tarkovsky kind of does is, especially during the final part, he, with the Stalker like not being able to like help his wife, or being kind of selfish with himself and the Zone, with him basically tricking the writer into going into the meat mincer, with him attacking the professor towards the end so he doesn't like attempt to blow up the room. He kind of creates him as an antagonist because he's opposed to the other characters, because there isn't really like a proper like a big omnipotent villain of the whole thing. It's more like human nature than anything else.
The main conflicts the characters face are from within themselves and their relationships with each other, rather than an outside conflict being imposed on them. The Zone's a neutral entity, if it even is an entity.
Is it ever explained what the washer and bandage thing kind of does?
Yeah, where he ties the bolts.
You know, where he throws the thing.
I think it's just more of a like a way to, I don't know, his way, like a Stalker's ways of seemingly finding out the Zone are completely alien to the writer and the professor, and so they would kind of be to us, because I mean a lot of the times in the film the writer's kind of the person who is, a lot of things are explained to, like the origin of the Zone and what to do in the Zone.
Yeah, he seems to be the sort of audience stand-in for exposition purposes. I got the impression that
him not knowing what, like, like bolts tied to pieces of string, him not knowing what that is, and him not really ever knowing what that is, or the Stalker's methods, is pretty much what we're not meant to know. It's basically not really important, I guess.
I got the impression it was some kind of navigation thing, like a way of checking that the route in that direction is sound and isn't like the Zone's not going to start screwing with them if they go that way.
Yeah, that seems to be
possibly as a way to like preemptively trigger any reactions, but yeah, it doesn't need to be known, so it isn't. I mean, that's the case with a lot of the the exact nature of this. It was seems to be a future world, a very, very, by the looks of it, grim and poverty-stricken one. And, the exact nature of that is left very vague and unclear to the audience, which I quite liked.
But I think it's quite important because you can kind of pull it in. You can kind of put it in a like any sort of context. Like it could just be a random like country village in the UK or whatever, and then the Zone is they can travel from there. It's basically like a placeholder for just anywhere on Earth.
Yeah.
Rather than making it like extremely specific, like, oh, this is in, I don't know,
Russia.
Yeah, just anywhere in Russia, like in, say, just like in like an outskirt place.
It certainly has a very Soviet look to it, which obviously isn't surprising considering
it
was filmed.
It's very dark. It's very bleak. It is very Soviet.
Yeah, it could be a sort of any kind of urban area, couldn't it? Really, we don't need to know. So,
I think with the bits in the city, the backdrops that they use of the like corroding ships and the power plants in the background show you that the whole place is kind of like dilapidated, and the way that the general populace is living there, it's not very good, and it really gives you the idea that, yeah, people would go to the zone because it's not as dilapidated. I mean, the original, the first bit, it's only in like yellows and oranges and browns.
Yeah, it's all sepia, the real world, and then the zone is colour.
But only when they go into the zone do they actually see colours, vibrant blues and greens, which are very welcome to the person watching it. And
it makes it it makes it more welcoming.
You can see why in that kind of environment people would be willing to risk getting shot by the military to get to this, potential source of happiness. Because it seems to be some sort of, the images of decay and deterioration aren't just limited, like you said, they're not just restricted to the zone. This, all of the outside world is still seems to be sort of slowly falling apart and rotting away.
Yeah, like it kind of makes the zone more welcoming. It's like, would you rather go to this like luscious nature place, or would you rather go to the set of Losing My Religion?
Yeah, exactly. It's
But it is said that there are people who went to live there, and of course we find their corpses in a random cupboard in the zone.
We don't know whose corpse it is.
I assumed they were people who were trying to get to the room, but then they just took the wrong way. And then there was like the mangled, kind of mutated. Was that a corpse in the car near the tanks?
Yeah, I think that's more like the corpse of one of the army people who were trying to attack the zone.
Yeah, I think it was. It was definitely a corpse that they saw in the area just when they were close to the room. But whose it was or how it got there, we can only speculate on.
I really liked that part because I can't remember if you can see the tanks, but they're kind of like stood in front of the tanks, all of them, and then they all move away and you can see all like these dilapidated tanks, but I can't remember if like you could see the tanks before they moved.
I don't think you
not.
can, if I recall. He does like to, Tarkovsky does like to make a lot of use of characters looking at something that we can't see. That happens a lot.
Like they're looking into the room and we can't see it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. Actually,
that's the 5-minute shot of the rain.
As they just sit and give up and see blood in the water.
There was a couple of times where I'm still not like 100% certain on why, but there were a couple of moments where like the wife at the end, she's talking to the audience.
Oh yeah.
And so's the writer in the bit where then like kind of the sandy bit with the well. I'm still not sure of why that was.
I think with the writer, isn't it that he's talking to the other two, but the camera is like in the way almost, so it looks like he's addressing the audience. But I think with the wife, I think she does seem to be breaking the fourth wall. It's a monologue that it's you couldn't tell whether she's
not very well executed, in my opinion.
No, I would agree with that one. I thought it was kind of a bit tacked on. I mean, the final...
Yeah, it seemed like an unnecessary addition, honestly. I didn't quite see what its purpose was.
The final part of the film is kind of hit or miss. Basically, I feel like it should have ended where... Like, I mean, having them outside of the zone's fine enough, but I think it should have ended right after, like, the Stalker and his wife. Like, the Stalker's kind of, like, basically, like, unloading his emotional torment to his wife. And then it kind of stops there. It kind of cuts out all the stuff with the child, all of the stuff with the mother breaking the fourth wall. I think a perfect cut-off ending, it would shave a good 10 minutes off.
Yeah, I think that would...
I think it just works so much better.
I feel that would work for sort of symbolism as well, because, like, the movie starts with the Stalker in bed, and then if we end with the Stalker in the same bed, I think that would work as a nice touch. But at the same time, the very final shot of the child moving glasses off the table and the rumbling train and the music playing over the radio is really impactful. Yeah. I think also it is actually foreshadowed right at the start of the movie, isn't it? Because when it pans over, and I think you can see the kid is in bed, and you can see the glass moving back and forth. But obviously, certainly when I was watching, I assumed, it's juddering about because the train's going past. But then by the end, actually, no, it's foreshadowing what she's doing there. Of course, what the fact that she's telekinetic means or could potentially have consequences for, who knows?
I personally would have ended it at the scene where the 5-minute long rain scene, and I would have had that rain.
I thought you were going to say the start.
I mean, that would be the ideal bit to end it, hopefully. But I would have ended it at the rain scene and then had the credits go down during that rain.
That seems like a pretty solid ending.
Yeah.
I do like the little bit of them around.
I'm torn because on the one hand you could definitely have finished it with the rain scene. Actually, on the one hand I like the extra bits at the end, but on the other hand, I would have preferred to end with the rain scene just because of the extra ambiguity of whether they ever leave.
Yeah, I'd have liked it to be ambiguous if they ever went into the room or not.
There's a certain sort of not frustration.
I like the fact they didn't enter.
I really like the fact they didn't enter. Again, better left in mystery. There is a certain sort of, it would have been knowing that they all got out safely takes something away, I think. Though again, the fact that we just cut to them all sitting at the bar in the same positions they were when they first started there at the beginning of the movie.
Still kind of unhappy.
Yeah, there's a sense of
back to Paddy's pub.
It's cyclical. Like they started there. It's almost like Hero's Journey. Start, leave, return. But in this case, they started there. They went out seeking satisfaction and happiness and fulfillment. Didn't get any, and are back where they started, both geographically and emotionally, because they're still all kind of depressed. Possibly even more so than they were when they set out, so if anything they've got worse.
Because there's no hope.
The Stalker definitely did.
Yeah, the writer, the professor, kind of hard to say really for those two.
They seem to be about as unhappy, but a bit more satisfied.
Yeah, they're both unhappy, but they're a bit more aware.
I mean, the professor's kind of doomed.
Yeah, of course, because
he's already told the authorities.
His the university staff and the authorities know that he ran off with a nuclear weapon, so he is screwed when he gets back to work. I do also obviously just the fact that we don't learn any of the characters' actual names. I do like that.
I thought that was cool.
I thought it kind of hammered home more the fact that they're meant to kind of be representations of certain parts.
Yeah, they're more ciphers for ideas than actual sort of people, but they are still rounded characters. It's just the way they are supposed to play a symbolic role.
I think they're more of an amalgamation because in the original Roadside Picnic book, they had multiple journeys into the zone, whereas this just focused on one journey into the zone that was fabricated by whatever his name is.
Tartovsky. That's it.
Tartovsky. So it's kind of like an amalgamation of the characters in the original book.
I keep having to be careful not to misspeak and say Tartakovsky as in the animator. And then
I say Tartovsky because it's so much fun to say. I've said it a couple of times now.
It's Russian surname, so it's kind of satisfying to say.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it is like a super loose adaptation of the book, isn't it? Yeah. I think Roadside Picnic is.
I might read the book.
Yeah, it
sounds like stuff happens with it.
Worth a read. I think Roadside Picnic isn't it in the book it's made explicitly clear that the zone is the result of alien like technology, and it's because they've stopped by on Earth or whatever then left, hence the title.
I like how both the book and the film, they both show kind of uninterest in the actual creation of the zone, and they're more interested in like the effect of it on humanity as a whole, because that's a lot of what happens in the book. I've read up a bit on the book. It looks good actually. It's in the Sci-Fi Masterworks collection sort of, so it'd be right up your alley, Michael.
Probably good. Yeah, I might have to pick that up at some point. Give it a read.
Yeah, but I like how it didn't in the film. I like the ambiguity. I like the ambiguity of the whole thing, with them looking into the room but we can't see it, and with like the possibly almost like folklore of how it came to be, the zone. And I think a lot of the long kind of crawling stalking shots, I think they kind of add to the mystery of it all, because it settles on one position for a while, and it can get a bit grating. I understand that.
Yes.
But I think I like it because it really like narrows down what you can see. Like, it doesn't reveal a lot about the zone. You barely see a lot of it. And
it is very careful very careful on what he reveals to the audience, and not being able to. I think it's actually really good because you don't get a sense of the zone's geography. and how it actually connects and is laid out, which is very much deliberate, of course, because it is confusing and constantly changing. So it helps that sense of dislocation you kind of get as they move between the areas over what seems to be the course of like a couple of days, I think.
Yeah, like I'd say 2 or 3.
They sleep at least 2 times, I think.
Yes, but when they sleep, it's in broad daylight. They just had a lunchtime
again
nap.
though, the way time seems to work in there and is again sort of weird and ambiguous. So possibly the days are longer. Can't say.
The whole thing looks like it was filmed in Park Gate.
Christ, Park Gate's been looking a bit rough, hasn't it?
Yeah.
A couple of my favourite things about it is at one point when they're all sleeping, you've got the Stalker kind of in the same position, like he's sleeping in the zone. You know it's the zone because that's like where he laid down, but it's in the sepia colour scheme again, and I think like that colour scheme kind of shows like a place of discomfort and just like not like griminess and unwelcoming, and it could kind of show the Stalker even in this place is starting to feel unhappy and unwelcomed to this place. Yeah. He definitely seems to be later on where he's like hopeless towards it, and he's questioning what's even the point if all these nihilistic people who want these wishes just like don't believe in it, and what's his point anymore. And another part I really loved is with the cinematography. Like in the final bit, there's the bit where they're all arguing and they've got the phone in that phone room, and it's just a shot through the doorway, and you can kind of see a very cramped version of that room, and a lot of the tension's kind of heightened, especially when you find out what the professor is kind of up to. And then the next shot, it kind of cranes out, and then you've got this huge watery room. You've got like actual fish in there, like under the water, and it kind of reveals
all
more.
Kois and stuff.
It does. It reveals more, and that's kind of what I love. It kind of unravels, which I mean, the whole thing kind of unravels in that final room as well. And there's another part involving the part where
it's not the dog, is it?
The dog. Oh, what do you mean the dog?
Well, didn't you pick up on the dog? Because the Stalker is getting depressed, and then he's followed around by a literal black dog.
Oh, the black dog. Oh, I could see that. I think that's a bit on the nose, but I think you're right there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, this is so goddamn on the nose. It's so obvious.
Not clear where the dog comes from, is it? Is he a creation of the zone? Has he been living there? The fact that he leaves with the characters might tell us something, or possibly means something.
But one of another favourite cinematography bits is where he's sleeping, and he's in like the sepia colour scheme in the zone. The camera kind of glides along to him. He glides for a very long time, which may be tedious, as I'm sure Joseph would know. But it kind of glides along, and you see all this debris, and like it shows kind of the age and how much has been going on in this zone. Like you see like machine guns, you see like, I think there's a watch there, or a clock.
Yeah, syringes and stuff as well.
Syringes, yeah, exactly. And it slowly like goes across, and I find it quite serene because it's quite a lot of gorgeous imagery in it. And then it slowly cranes up to the Stalker's hand, and I like how it reveals that he's there rather than it being some kind of random shot. It kind of flows into it really nicely.
It certainly seems like careful attention has gone into the structure and framing of pretty much every shot.
Or maybe he just filmed it like really long ones so it'd be quicker to film, because I assume after his third round of doing it, he really wanted to get out there quick.
Wants to get it over with, yeah.
Well, this was his third cinematographer, because every time he refilmed it, he fired the cinematographer and got a new one.
Yeah, isn't it like the original version? Basically, according to the people who'd seen it or had been filming it, is like every shot was different to the next version, and then the next version. Iteration and improvement.
Yeah.
I would love to see some of the shots in the other versions.
If only.
I think the original version was stored in like a safe place, but then it burnt down, so we'll never see it. I think there's only a few telesnaps of it remaining.
Seems like there was a bit of wrangling with the Soviet sort of film authorities, just in general. Apparently they wanted to, funnily enough actually, they wanted him to cut it down and make it shorter.
Funnily enough.
Because they reckon the audience wouldn't get it.
This is one of the few times where I'll agree with the Soviet Union.
It's not even his longest film. There were two longer.
He only did like 7, didn't he?
There's
movies.
He did 7. There's Andrei Rubikov, which is like 200 minutes. And then there's his final film, The Sacrifice, which is, I think, 3 hours? Solaris is almost 2 hours and a half. The rest aren't that long. But yeah, I've only watched Stalker out of his films, and it kind of makes me want to watch all the other ones now.
I definitely want to watch Solaris. Maybe we could do it at some point in the future.
Yeah, if Joseph can stomach it.
You know what? I'm up for anything.
Honestly, I think that might be a little less exhaustive. Apparently, it's less exhaustive than 2001.
Yeah, 2001 is also quite.
It's paralleled with a lot.
I've never seen 2001.
They seem to be similar.
I don't know if I mean, it looks good, but like, I think if you're not watching it on a cinema screen, there's not really any point.
I mean, I remember I tried to watch 2001 a good 4 or 5 times. I never got past half an hour, but then I saw it for the 50th anniversary in cinema.
Yeah,
it was so good.
Both of us went,
so
didn't we?
long.
That was the first and only time I've seen it as well, and it is amazing on a cinema screen. Also, though, I was very glad of the fact that they did have like the intermission.
Oh,
you know, it's spectacular to watch, but you do need a bit of a break from it.
Yeah, I remember a sigh of relief from the back. That was really funny.
It's I mean, it's a great movie, but there is also like, you know, sitting down to watch it. Right, 25 minutes of monkeys, and now they're travelling across the lunar landscape.
Oh.
And they're still travelling across the lunar landscape. And they're still travelling across the lunar landscape. Without the long build-up, it wouldn't have the same kind of impact, would it? Which I think is the same for Stalker. Like, as much as I did find the length tedious at times,
oh boy, was it tedious!
It feels necessary for the atmosphere and the pacing and the build-up to the, I guess you'd call it a climax. I'd say that the climax would be the scene outside the room.
I think it was more an anticlimax, but it worked. I thought
it's anticlimactic, but it was the climax in terms of the story structure. The scene outside the room is the climax, but in terms of how it feels, well, considering that the goal our main character set out to achieve remains unachieved because nobody goes in the room. But of course, that's because they've changed.
Kind of furthers the whole thing of dissatisfaction throughout the whole film. It is cyclical.
Yeah. The Stalker's never seemed like the most emotionally fulfilled guy, but only by the end it is.
No, he's kind of fulfilled by something that's empty. And I don't think what the writer said about him at the end was 100% true. I mean, I don't think he feels like God or feels that. He's just trying to fill an empty hole in himself.
I don't think... The thing is, yeah, we can't take the writers...
He just likes to make other people happy.
We can't take the writer's analysis of the characters as gospel because he is very caustic towards the other two. You know, he is... And towards himself, really. It is... Again, I think that... Thinking about the religious imagery, there is an element... Like I said about the imagery of the ruined church and the sense of like finding what he has put his faith in to be hollow, and there's nothing behind it, and there's no point in it. There's definitely a sort of, I think, interpretation of somebody losing their religious belief or whatever. I think he quotes, I can't remember there's a bit where he quotes from the Book of Revelation as well, and I can't remember what it actually is because if I could, it would probably...
Oh, what part was it? What part was it at? Because I know he quotes Porcupine's Brothers verses.
There's a couple of the poems. I might be wrong, but there was a bit that I was fairly sure was from the Book of Revelation. I can't remember what it is now.
I feel like I remember. Was that when he was talking to himself?
I think it's when he's talking to himself. Yeah, I'm gonna see if
that would make sense.
Look it up.
Yeah, but Joseph, do you want any input about your favourite film, Stalker?
The only thing that I'm trying to look for the Bible verse, but the first thing that comes up is 100 Bible verses about stalking. It surprised me that there's that many.
Here we go, found it. A passage from Revelation 6:12-17, talking about the opening of the sixth seal and the destruction of heaven and earth. So, yeah. Oh yeah, and that's it as well. There's a bit as well where he talks about. Yeah, here we go. The Stalker paraphrases a passage in Luke 24:13-18 about where Jesus meets two of the disciples after his resurrection, and they don't recognise him. But then he gets interrupted, and I can't. And yeah, there's I'm looking at IMDb, so I'm cheating. There's a fragment of a religious icon can be seen from the debris shown in the dream sequence. The wreath of thorns, of course. and there's a reference to the legend of the Wandering Jew, who is supposedly doomed to wander the earth until the second coming. So yeah, there's definitely some potential religious interpretations, though whether they're intentional, who can say?
Yeah, I mean, when he puts the crown on, he is kind of, I guess you can kind of make a connection where he's martyring his so-called happiness that he would get from the room for more of a satisfaction. He goes on, well, I say goes on, as Joseph would agree with, through the film about whether he says to himself like he's probably not going to be happy and he won't find like a point in writing even if he has this great inspiration.
Well, isn't his whole thesis that he believes that he writes because he's unhappy, and if he was happy he wouldn't write, so what's the point? If he's going to lose his life's work? Yeah,
he has all his money, he has all of his...
he's got 5 dogs.
He has his 5 dogs, and he doesn't really need to write for money, and he doesn't really need to write to prove himself or to be happy if he has that inspiration anymore. And there's a part where they're in the sand dune place with the well, and he basically has like this big monologue about how like all these people like blood sucking and they want more out of him. They just want more and more and more. Coming from a place, Tartakovsky, like he's an artist. He makes film. He would be very invested in that sort of way of thinking because more people like want things he's making. So it could be kind of a mouthpiece for him.
I definitely felt like out of all of the characters, the writer was the closest thing to Tarkovsky's mouthpiece. A lot of the stuff he says definitely feels like the director's own feelings, probably about his own work, I think, in the sense of dissatisfaction and having to be unhappy to create and all that. And
the film seems more... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, what you're saying about, the blood-sucking and the expectations, again, talking about was the production with the Soviet film authorities trying to get him to change it afterwards and all that. You do get the sense that he's very much sick of people trying to interfere in his work because he's creating it for himself rather than for the audience.
Like, out of all the characters, the writer's the one he's most the film is most sympathetic to, and the wife. But I think the wife is more sympathetic to downplay how sympathetic the Stalker is, because I feel like the film itself is hammering the Stalker a lot more than the other characters.
That's the Stalker's kind of tricky, isn't he? Because he genuinely does come across as quite sympathetic. But yet the start of the movie is him abandoning his wife and daughter to go back into the zone again, despite knowing how dangerous it is, and despite her tearfully begging for him not to do it. So it's...
And then she's having a weird seizure on the ground.
Yeah, that's his introductory scene as well. So, and obviously, his wife has her own feelings on the matter. We see at the end, but again, there's definitely a certain conflict of, how good is he? Yeah, if we can even judge him.
He tries to do good, but a lot of the time he seems to not bring that. He's searching for this way to bring happiness, but he can't. He's not satisfied in that.
He's trying to bring other people happiness, and he fails, and it clearly affects him.
Yeah.
Bad luck for him, certainly.
Yeah. Have we got any more to say?
I feel like we're approaching final thoughts.
To be fair, it's a film you could really dig in deep to.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that there are many YouTube video essays to be made on this one.
I had a look at a few in preparation to this, and I didn't like any of them.
Oh, you guys seem to do a lot more preparation than I do. I watch the movies, then maybe read the Wikipedia page, and then go in blind, pretty much.
I have a set attachment to the film. I'm not sure why. I think it really appealed to me. I hope it doesn't say anything bad about me from Joseph's perspective.
No, I can definitely see how it would have like a personal appeal for someone. I guess it depends on.
It's a very theological film. If I was to put into...
There's a lot of philosophical wondering, and there's a lot of, again, religious symbolism, and and there's all sorts of...
A lot of pondering and not a lot of wandering.
Yeah.
So, should we approach final thoughts right now?
So.
Yeah. Jude, do you want to go first, seeing as though it's your film?
Well, I wish it was my film. I would love to make that. Or maybe not. It sounds quite of a chaotic and stressful time.
Yeah, considering that if you'd made it, you would have ended up dead.
Well, that as well. But I do love the film. I do adore it. I find it very serene and relaxing because all the scenery is gorgeous. There's a lot you can sink into. It's not it is quite a heavy watch, but I think I definitely enjoyed it more the second time round. The first time round, I did really feel like I feel for both of you having brought this upon you, this monolith of that. But so I did have to watch it in 2 portions. But this time round, I thought it went quite quickly in comparison. But
sorry, I was just gonna say. To be fair, I think it is intended to be watched in 2 portions, isn't it? Because there's the split an hour in.
That really confused me because I mean the use of music in it is really weird. Apart from like the end, it's got these big like sci-fi like synths like at the end of part 1. It also doesn't have a part where it says part 1.
Yeah, I think it was to. Again, I read this up. It was to do with like. It was like the Soviet film sort of board like required it to be split up because of how it would be screened in cinemas or something like that. No, actually, I think it was required. He split it so it would technically be 2 movies so we could get more funding. I think that might have been it.
Right, because I mean the first part, without displaying it as part 1, ends like an hour, and then there's another hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's quite a confusing sort of break because it's like, wait, what, part 2? I spent the next hour after that thinking, so when is it going to come up and say part 3?
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
But anyway, we're getting off track. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I think... Oh, I didn't get my thing yet. Yeah, I think it's pretty great. I really want to watch more Tarkovsky stuff. And whenever I end up back on here, I'll probably save you from it because it might be another task for you. But yeah, I do love it. I'd probably give it... If it was to give like a score... A good old 9.5 around that area.
Nice. Michael, do you want to give your score next?
Yeah, I would say I would not recommend it to everybody. I can imagine most people would not be a fan. I can imagine your average cinema audience is not going to be a fan, but for some people are going to love it, and it really depends on whether you like slow contemplative movies or not. As it was, I did end up enjoying it in the end, and I am glad that I watched and finished it, and I do think I'll sit down and rewatch it again at some point in the future to properly get my head around it. And I can certainly appreciate it, even if personally I did find it a bit laborious. So I would have to hit it with a solid 8.5 probably.
Nice.
I definitely want to see more of Tarkovsky, I think. That's probably a good sign.
Yeah, do watch Solaris because I haven't watched it, but I feel like you would really love it.
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can find it. Right, Joseph.
Well, I've got 2 markings. I think it gets a 10 out of 10 as an alternative to Night Owl, but as a movie, I'm going to have to give it a 2 out of 10. I'm sorry, Jude.
Oh my god.
I'm so sorry. I know this hurts you. You're wounded.
I know. I thought. I mean, I kind of hope we'd sway you with our thoughts.
Our intellectual thoughts.
I can see where you're coming from. I just didn't enjoy it. And no amount of talk is going to make me think, oh yes, I enjoyed watching that. Because I didn't.
Oh, well, that's a shame. Well, well. I mean, it is not for everyone. It is quite laborious.
Still, that's that.
So this was the 3rd episode of the JMC Cast. If you want to come and guest star on this show, then contact me on my social media or Michael on his social media. We will see you next week. Goodbye and good night from me, Joseph.
Goodbye and good night.
Goodbye.